to quickly switch to our next panelists. What we've tried to do is to make sure that we don't overwhelm the day. So basically, usually if it's going to run longer than this, we usually take a break. But we're not going to take a break this time because we just want to run into the next panel. Okay, so I just beg the indulgence of everybody, because usually this is a good spot to just take a moment to let everything we just said sink in. But I'm just begging you to just stay with us for about another hour, and I promise to let you go on time. Okay, and then we'll be back tomorrow for another marathon. Wow, thank you again to His Excellency Ambassador Hilda. Such an honor. I'm just honored to have you here and to continue our partnership there. And now I would like to introduce our panelists on the global perspective. I'll welcome Ms. Claire Alexander, Director, Africa Scotland Business Network. Also, Mr. Sam Onanda, Business Development Manager at the African Chamber of Commerce, that drives China-Africa trade, and also Mr. Dylan Piatti, MD for Africa, the Advantage Group International, is no stranger to this platform. He's just a brilliant leader to have on this panel. So I welcome you all. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see your face or faces. Dylan, where are you? On mute.
Yes, hello.
Fantastic.
Morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are.
Yes, give us your immediate reaction to all you've heard so far.
It's wonderful to get a vote of confidence from those who are at the pinnacle of making things happen in the continent, yet also sit at the fulcrum of connecting all the dots. And look, we've been engaged with the ambassador and for a while, and there's some excellent work happening there. Great to see this. I think there's a lot more that can certainly happen, especially with the US diaspora, and increase those investment flows across continent. Will be very exciting to see that. Really excellent to have that input, and also, Doug McMillan. What a fantastic opening from him. I work closely with his Mass Mart Walmart team locally, and I know they certainly are invested in continent. So very exciting to see this platform growing and all the participants involved.
Wow, thank you so much. And one thing I like to say is this is a platform that we all grow together. So that's why I like to bring on repeat guests. I'd reach out to you. I was like, I don't want to bother you, but it would be nice to have you on again. And you were like, yes, Toy. So thank you so much for being such a great partner to the platform as well. Mr. Sam Onanda, let me get your immediate reaction. You're really also at the leading front of driving trade with the continent, particularly China trade with Africa. What's your immediate reaction to the conversation so far?
Yes, well, of course, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think that what was said was quite interesting in terms of the opportunity presented. The mechanics of it and the logistics of it need to be further explored. There are obviously going to be a lot of challenges along the way, but I think what was most positive was the digital initiative, the e-commerce platform regarding trade. I think that is going to be the future. We found already that with COVID-19, the greatest resilience to the conditions and restrictions applied by the COVID-19 pandemic were mostly alleviated by having a digital solution. So for the AU to create a platform for such advancements throughout trade, I think that's definitely interesting. I would also like to see something more detailed in terms of internationally. I think it was obviously explained as just a Africa program, inter-Africa program, but I would love to see that in terms of the international markets. Is it going to be applied to EU, South America, North America, Asia, the Middle East, and so on? So to get a firmer understanding of that would be great. And I think that I'll just work with you, Toyin, because you're going to put me in the right places.
That's amazing. Sometimes I like to hide behind. People don't really know the reach we have, but thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, we will keep moving forward, and we definitely welcome the partnership, yours as well. This is not where it ends. I like to say this is not just about an event. This is a strategic conversation we're having to advance the technical aspects of trade with Africa as well. Thank you so much. Miss Claire, such an honor to have you on this platform. In a moment, I'm going to allow you to really introduce yourself, but I also want to get your very, very initial reaction, looking through the lens of the Scottish side of things. Please.
Thank you so much, Toyin, and thank you for having Africa Scotland Business Network in your panel. It's such an honour for a network that was only born 18 months ago from South Africa to be taking part in such phenomenal platforms like this. One of the things that does strike me about your event, Toyin, it's so refreshing to see such a rich blend of people and participants in this session. Normally, events can be quite one-dimensional. You have a space for diplomats and honorary civilians, and a space for corporates, a space for the young entrepreneurial disruptors. So it's so lovely to see such an amazing group of people from all parts of the business ecosystem.
Oh, thank you. And it's by design. I think it's a nice pot of soup. It's a nice pot of soup. And that's what makes it delicious, if I can say that. Thank you so much. So let's get to proper introduction. To be honest with you, sometimes I just prefer my panelists to introduce themselves. One way I can read your bio, but really, I think your voice is the best voice to just say, what you're doing or what you've been attempting to do, the results so far. So Claire, we'll go to you. Please just share your heart in terms of how you drive engagements and with the Scottish government and private sector.
Sure. So you can probably tell from my accent that I'm very Scottish. And I've been living in South Africa for the past 14 years. I started my first business in South Africa. It was a bit of a do or die situation when I was in my 20s, and Firecracker, the events, what is now an award-winning events and marketing agency here, was born 10 years ago with $3. It's now a fully fledged business in South Africa. However, I've always had this notion at the back of my mind: how can I, as a foreign national that lives in South Africa, I'm just an ordinary girl from an ordinary background in Scotland, how can I foster much more meaningful and direct trade between my native country and my adopted country and continent? I knew that I didn't want to be a consultant. Africa has many consultants, and granted, I do not have the experience as an international trade consultant to start a business in that. So I always knew that our power is in our network. We know how to build communities, but I knew I couldn't do this myself. I knew that this was an ambition that was much bigger than myself and my business partner. And for that reason, we decided, we saw two opportunities in the market to build a much more proactive, contemporary, and diverse business network for the private sector from Africa. We would then use the model of an international business network to connect with the public and private sector of Scotland more meaningfully and directly, and as collaborative partners. So that is exactly what we set out to do. We built a very strong brand, and we put quite a diverse board together of Scottish, English, and African entrepreneurs. And we launched the network on the 6th of November 2019 from Cape Town. And we started off with one member from Johannesburg. They're called expatweb.com. They're the biggest immigration agency in South Africa. And since that day, we now have 85 members in 11 countries now, 7 of which are in Africa. And we are going from strength to strength, Toyin. We are now using the asset of our very rich and diverse business network to foster and attract trade from Scotland and indeed other parts of the UK. We have members from Liverpool, across London, Manchester as well. So and to give you a very specific response, we are now actively assisting and facilitating with the Scottish Government and the British High Commissions across Africa, 7 companies into Africa as we speak.
Wow. Wow. Congratulations to you. And, you know, your story is just fascinating. Absolutely. And I think it should encourage everybody, attendees, panelists, in terms of you just going in with your idea and now you command the interest of the Scottish government.
That's correct. I'm not sure command is the right word.
Well, when you get their attention, I use strong words, when you get the attention, when what you're doing is seen as meaningful in advancing their course, that's you're commanding them in my language, right? It's getting their attention, right? Because easily they don't have to pay attention.
Yeah, this is so true. Quite interestingly, before I launched the business network, I'm a very collaborative person. In fact, I've just done a psychometric test, and even when I'm hyperextended and a bit overworked, the first thing I do is collaborate with people. And before we launched the network, I like to think that I did the honourable thing, and I set up a meeting with Scottish Government and I said, hi, my name's Claire. I'm an entrepreneur in South Africa, but I'm equally passionate about benefiting Scotland as well. This is our vision to start a refreshing, exciting, diverse, and proactive business network from Africa that would connect directly to the public and private sector in Scotland. And they said, brilliant, we're going to keep our eye on you. We don't know you from a bar of soap, so please go back to Africa and prove yourself. And that's exactly what we did. And we have nurtured an amazing partnership with the Scottish Government. They have even appointed a new trade specialist in South Africa. Prior to that, they used to only have one office in Accra in Ghana. So it's absolutely brilliant to see the Scottish Government expand its footprint in Africa as well. So yeah, it's all about collaboration from us, from the private sector perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dylan, let me bring you on here. Wow, you've been in the private sector, leading conversations in e-commerce, in technology, in retail. Where are you at right now? I just want to see your game plan, because we're really, in my mind, at the very beginning of ramping this up. What's your take, Dylan?
It is in infancy. It's great to see the conversation evolving, because you're always concerned that, we started having this conversation probably 5-6 years ago, and it is certainly evolving. And I've seen this evolution come through with the same stakeholders who 5-6 years ago were kind of not that willing to get involved. And the primary conversation there for me actually is one, the future fitness of Africa, which is what we're all talking about. So how do we create the future Africa that we want and that we can leave for our children and their children's children? So what does that require? And there are multitude of things that are required to set the platform for success in the future. The other side, though, that for me is a critical pillar in that broader conversation is what we call the digital transformation of the continent. And we use this word almost as a buzzword now. And so it gets thrown around a lot because it's the right thing to say, the future, digital transformation, etc., trade. But actually diving into what it means is where it becomes interesting. I mean, Sam made a good point in saying, well, what are the actual things that are being done? And this is one of the risks in Africa, and it's a primary risk for capital flow and investment in continents. So the reality is that capital flows towards opportunity. And while it's a wonderful thing to get excited about the continent, and we're all invested in this continent, that's why we're having this conversation, I think it's important that we don't do too much of a song and dance and, you know, we're cheering each other on for excitement without being kind of cognizant of the realities. I remember it was quite an eye-opener for me being invited to present at the World Investment Forum by the UN Economic Commission. And, you know, real imposter syndrome to sit on a stage with Alibaba, Vertex Holdings, which is the, you know, the largest VC firm in the world, and the head of Imyada, which is the impact fund that spun out of eBay. And then, you know, two other colleagues from the African continent who started one in an investment fund, another one started more for Africa, which for me is kind of the Alibaba of Africa concept. And when the head of Vertex Holdings put up his investment map, which was global, there wasn't a single investment in Africa. And I cornered him afterwards and asked, you know, why is this? You know, we really are pushing this as the kind of new frontier and the opportunity. We talk about the youth dividend and the window of opportunity and all these things that we've been talking about for the last 10 years. And, you know, and as a result of that, we've also got the challenge of the false dawn. But I said, why have you not invested? He said, well, the reality is that you're competing, the continent is competing with LATAM, India, and Asia for my capital. And while I think there is a future opportunity, at the moment, the risk profile is too high. And that is linked to clarity and transparency in terms of what is happening within continent and within governments and within the different trade blocs. And we see that. So we need to, and this is why I think this is so important, because there's a private sector drive, which is looking for opportunity to create return on investment, but we need then the public sector side to create an enabling environment. And we do know that policy lags behind innovation. So we need to promote an environment where policy is not trying to lead innovation, because that is just hiding to nowhere. But I digress. So you know, where am I playing at the moment? I'm sitting on the board of the Italian South African Chamber of Trade and Industry to promote investment into South Africa and the continent. That's sitting under the European Chamber of Commerce. I was previously chairman of the board of the Africa E-Commerce Forum, which is now set up multi-country chapters and is involved very much with the African Union at a multi-stakeholder level in terms of inputs to the Continental Free Trade Agreement and its digital strategy. And then I've left Deloitte after about 10 years and now running a small advisory firm where we focus predominantly in the retail FMCG sector and the relationship dynamics between those multinational and local suppliers and all the top retailers across the continent to enhance that retail FMCG landscape, which for me is exciting because that's where we're seeing a lot of opportunity in the future, is the growth of this consumer base, this youth development coming through. And as we enhance investment and economic access or inclusive economic development, we're going to see greater consumption. And that's what the rest of the world is now looking at in terms of the future, is access to this 1.3 trillion or billion market.
Fantastic. And for everyone, the reason this platform is designed this way, it's private sector led. So I've spent my time in private sector, right? And I used to remember all this, training events and training summits that we go in 5 days, we immerse ourselves, things that we can take back to our job. And in a way, this platform is a blend of both because it's set up to be an enriching deep dive, because you're right. We tend to stay high level, which is fine, which we can do at a strategic level. And we get excited about the strategic level, AFCFTA, digitization, digital disruption. Fantastic. That used to be my job in terms of designing multi-year strategy for the world's largest. But guess what? At some point, we have to land that plane, right? At some point, you have to take those strategic vision and you have to actualize it and bring it down to real life. And that's where I see the struggle, Dylan, is a lot of times people say AFCFTA and we run with the narrative and the press clippings and this, blanket statement, which is fantastic, which is getting excitement behind it. But what is missing is how. How do we tap into this? What does it mean to my job, whether as a diaspora or a foreign investor or a private sector stakeholder on the continent? I think that's where that opportunity is for someone like you and I to really then help people, because not everybody has that innate skill set to see where the world is going and to be able to translate it to today. So Africa is now. So for example, solutions that help businesses win during COVID were built 5, 6, 7 years ago. And the solutions that Africa is going to need 5, 6, 7 years from now has to be built today. So I loved when you talked about future proofing. Can you dive deeper into what that actually means? Just because your mind is absolutely brilliant. I just love the way you see the world.
You're far too complimentary with the incredible people on this group. But there's a couple of things. So, I mean, I know that Prof. Nimrod mentioned agro-processing. We know that there's these big key themes: manufacturing, agro-processing, retail, and then education underpinning that. But there are opportunities to dive in at a practical level, and we've got to look at that practical level. And this is the one thing we tend to bucket everything into the same. We need to look at your big investments, all right, which is where often this is one of the challenge with capital investment flows, especially from the US. They're saying there's a threshold of $50 million. Now, to find a threshold business to invest in continent at that is a challenge. So you've got to look then at the next tier and then tier below. However, the history in terms of access to information, data, so you can actually calculate your IRR, etc., for investment, is not the same with the rest of the world. So it's a little bit more of a leap, increases your risk factor, but with that, there's a potential return. Now, this has changed significantly over the last few years, just that conversation. I've been sitting on, during COVID, actually, on a monthly cohort where it was organized. And in fact, I was the only one for South Africa. We had Diaspora there from not only the US, but also the UK, sitting on an advisory board where we had a cohort pitching of entrepreneurs across Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Nigeria, Senegal, and Democratic Republic of Congo, pitching their projects, looking for support in terms of investment or advisory support to then scale them up. And for me, this was such an eye-opener, because we talk about those 4 big themes, but you've got to break those down into the different sectors that are within them. I mean, there might be individuals here who are aware of this, but we had the one cohort we looked at raising some capital for, who is looking at the snail production in Ghana. I did not know that there were 20,000 tons of snails consumed a year just in Ghana alone, and that there's actually opportunity for an export market, but there's an entire value chain play in that development, and there's an opportunity to engage with that. To another entrepreneur has credited what they called an Uberization of access to fresh fish. So, within their home community, everyone will be going, to wherever the harbor or the fish market, and you're saying, well, why not cut out that middleman, and we'll take it directly from the fisherman to the consumer. And by doing that, we also increase the returns for the fishermen. So it's not, all these middlemen in between. Now, these are significant opportunities that are growing up. Now, how do we come across them? That's the difficult part. How do you find out about them? That's the difficult part. There are so many different pockets that are happening, and we need, organizations, communities like this to be able to bring together those different pockets of where individuals are engaged, because we don't know what we don't know. And the only way to find out is to increase engagement and develop communities. And look, that's what I do within the business that I run, and where I sit on boards, is trying to develop these ecosystems that are actually all working in a common direction, but often against each other in many ways.
Wow, this is incredible, because even for me, case in point, over the years, as I've tried to bring communities together, one thing I've now done is to group people into 3 levels. So I've had to put on my strategic design hats to look at the community, to assess them, and to realize that we can actually bring value to different types of people, upper tier, mid tier, low tier, right? And because I've seen these unique features and the unique needs of this group of people. And that's something I've had to do. Also, what you talked about is linking the supply chain, creating a value chain that actually connects all of the stakeholders together. In order to move products from farm to the market or to the shelf, you have to really create a value chain. And one way that I'll say we're doing it now, and I want to encourage, people like you and Claire and Sam to bring proximity. If you can bring those stakeholders within proximity of one another, that's where the magic is. Agriculture, logistics, supply chain, branding, marketing, distribution, retail, having those link them together. I think that's where the magic has to happen, because typically what you just said, Dylan, is people are often walking in different directions. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants the same thing. And it's so important that we now stay in communities that helps us advance our overall goal, which is, yes. So I'll come. Do you want to respond to that before I go to Mr. Sam? Yeah, I see your face. Go on.
It's a look. This is something that is I believe is true from a continental perspective, from a regional perspective, sovereign perspective, and then from a business and family nucleus perspective, is that we want to traditionally work within the channels that we know and feel secure in. Why? Because this is like the construct of business, is these concepts of silos within silos. Because now I have a defined purpose, and it scares me when I need to work beyond that specific channel. And that is the challenge. We actually have to break out of the challenge, the world and the future, and what it is about creating an ideal future, and even how businesses work, how fintechs and unicorns are created, about working outside of these traditional bound challenges that are not only business challenges and parameters, but also mental parameters. And I think this is something that is absolutely critical. And I see it at a private sector level, and I see it at a civil society and government level. And we have to keep encouraging each other to break down those barriers. It's going to require stepping on toes. It's going to require frustration and angst, because we're encouraging people to say, if I'm in retail, how is manufacturing, transportation, digital, governance, taxation, as an example, all impacting everything I'm doing? And I cannot think of myself in isolation, whether I'm in South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania. It's all linked. Because at the moment, we talk about the Continental Free Trade Agreement, but I assure you that I've been to sessions where we are the private sector in the minority, and then the rest is Pan-African government, where the conversation really is about how do we ensure that we are winning the most. So that is not about everyone winning together. It's ensuring that I'm winning the most as this happens. And that tension is something we need to be honest about, open about, and try and break it down, because otherwise the future, we're going to have the same conversation in a couple of years' time otherwise.
Wow, incredible. Mr. Sam, I want to bring you onto the conversation. Wow. This is good. Juicy stuff, right? Sam, you and I, we engage, we talk, we partner. Thank you so much. Share with people now the heavy lifting that your team does, and the successes and the challenges and what you've seen. Because I like to say, and I think I've told you this privately, you're sitting when it comes to China, I think China is ahead of the curve from where I'm sitting. So I'm looking to you to learn from you, because you've actually gained traction in terms of China-Africa trade. Can you share more about that, please?
Sure. Yeah, I think the correct introduction would be to say that the African Chamber of Commerce is the action behind the words. So our business was born out of that Africa requires options, and Africa needs to be educated about the variety of options that are available. The traditional means of doing business need to be more efficient. And to get to that optimum, we need to introduce those options to the stakeholders. So when the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation was created, the African Chamber of Commerce was brought in to implement the ideas that were behind that partnership between the Chinese involvement in Africa, as well as the African involvement in China. And a lot has not been said about the African involvement in China. Africa has had a long relationship with China. So there is a need to better educate African stakeholders of that opportunity, and also to educate the rest of the world about what's going on in Africa. I think that needs to be rebranded as well. So with the education process, we have implemented a number of different programs alongside the initiatives that are available in China. The China-Africa Economic Trade Expo has already provided opportunities for Mauritius. Mauritius is the first nation to sign a free trade agreement and actually implement that free trade agreement with China. So our next step is how to educate Mauritius stakeholders on what that opportunity means for them. Not just for the Chinese businesses that have been based in Mauritius for several decades now, but also for the Mauritius businesses who are now growing steadily in numbers in China, doing more business with China and in China. And that last part, in China, I think is the most important factor. One of the major barriers to doing business as an African overseas is that we do not register entities overseas as Africans. And this needs to be introduced. This should not be a faux pas. This should not be regulated by policy. This should be encouraged because if we're going to talk about vertically aligning a supply chain or a value chain from one nation to another, we need to establish entities in those foreign locations. And I think China understands this. Right now, we're working with the China International Import Expo to introduce foreign NGOs, NPOs, business associations, trade associations in China, not obviously purely just Africa, but from all over the world. So China is opening its doors to opportunity and allowing African businesses to register those entities to compete with Chinese entities in China. And in doing so, rather than seeing it as an either-or situation in terms of China buying from Chinese entities or China buying from African entities, China is encouraging the variety and diversity of options. And I think that's what other nations should be doing as well. And I think, as you said, when you mentioned that China are ahead of the curve, I think that other nations should also be taking that perspective when doing business with Africa, rather than seeing it as competition, rather than seeing it as a unknown option or an unknown entity. They should see it as a variety is the spice of life. And that if they're going to enjoy some African spices with their business meal, they should take a look at seriously introducing African businesses and encouraging African businesses in their business environment overseas, outside of Africa. And I think that's something that the AFCTA really should be considering, not just locally within Africa, but having AFCTA offices outside of Africa.
Wow.
That would really accelerate some of the momentum that is being built. But again, we talked about this last time. Ambition. Where is the ambition? So let's encourage that ambition with better education of the opportunities. And I think that's what you do.
Wow. Yeah, Sam, you've dropped so much here. Like, you've dropped so much, because I do look to you for lessons, you know that. Wow, where do I start from? You talked about FOCAC, right?
Yes, the Forum for China
Okay.
Africa Cooperation. Yeah.
Many people don't even know what that is.
That's exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about education opportunities.
So start there. Let's go back and just tell the world, like, what is FOCAC?
Sure. So this might be a bit of a faux pas, but FOCAC was modeled very similar to the Japanese TICAD agreement, which was a development program designed by Japan in Africa. FOCAC was supposed to be the Chinese mirror, the Chinese reflection to that, or the Chinese option to that. And what China saw as the closed door formulations of Chinese policy in Africa became more of the copy and paste of their poverty alleviation policies in China. They've taken those concepts, they've taken those ideas, and they've said, why don't we do this overseas? So they have, of course, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, but they also have the Belt and Road Initiative, which has been considered as a very innovative financial tool that is actually competing with the IMF in terms of their loaning capacity or their financing ability to entities around the world. So it creates a whole new perspective on how businesses can grow overseas. Because now African businesses can say, hey, well, this is how we grew in China. Why don't we do the same in the UK? Why don't we do the same in Scotland, for example? And I think that's extremely exciting for the African diaspora in Scotland. I don't know if you know this, but I actually grew up in Edinburgh, and I'm the Edinburgh, Claire. So I lived in Baverton. I don't know if you know where that is in Edinburgh, but there's a huge African diaspora in Scotland that have been aching for the opportunity to reconnect with Africa. And I believe that the AU needs to be aware of that option, because that is an untapped resource of knowledge when it comes to foreign opportunities that even Africans in Africa will not be able to understand what is happening for them in Scotland, or for them in America, or for them in China. So if they are better educated, then and I don't just mean the diaspora, I also mean the AU themselves. If they are better educated of these opportunities, then we can accelerate some of these programs that are just right now, just words. What we do is implement. So this is what's worked in China. Let's see if it's going to work in another place. And let's, rather than just talking about it, let's do it. Let's set up some companies, let's set up some entities that are going to accelerate the AFCTA overseas and open up new markets for African products, for African services overseas. Yeah, so let's see what happens, because at the moment, I'm implementing, I'm moving forward. I believe that a number of my partners are also moving forward. The work that I'm doing right now with, for example, a Dutch company called POPM in terms of the digital transformation, they're supporting Dutch businesses in Africa, and the African diaspora in the Netherlands are taking advantage of that opportunity to upgrade their businesses. And once an African does business very well overseas, naturally what they do is send their money back to Africa. That's a huge business opportunity there, financial remittances. And I think a number of African governments are paying attention to the financial flows, which from what I've read, are actually much larger than the aid donations from foreign countries to Africa. The remittances of the African diaspora far outweigh the those aid agencies' financial commitments. So just the issue right now is education. That's what I'm trying to stress here. And I think once people are better educated, we can take advantage of those opportunities.
I love it. I love it. Claire, do you want to jump in? I respond to that, because I see some amazing things happening on this panel. You and Dylan are both in South Africa. Did you know each other before?
No.
Oh, now you do.
It's great to meet you, Dylan. And I can see you've posted about Britta Bridges and Rand Merchant Bank. I'm in contact with both of them. Rand Merchant Bank are actually one of our flagship members. So yeah, I'd love to connect.
Fantastic, Dylan. So you have yourself a potential partner right there to move things in Scotland for your work. Brilliant. Do you also want to react to Sam being what he just said too as well?
Sam, I thought I heard a Scottish twang there, but I didn't want to be presumptuous. So that's absolutely brilliant that you have such a strong connection to Edinburgh. And it's also talking about the African diaspora in Scotland. You know, as you say, there's so many Africans, particularly who go to study in Scotland. For people in the audience here, Scotland has one of the best education systems in the world. Our infrastructure, our schools, right through to our universities are world class. A lot of young Africans go to Scotland to study and then decide to stay there and make it their home. And as you've correctly said, send a lot of money back to Africa. But quite interestingly, and maybe if I can just give the audience some information on that particular subject of young Africans in Scotland, we are working with the Scottish Alumni Network to actually formalise and collect all the data of the African alumni that have studied in Scotland together. It's a huge project, but we believe that it will present so much rich data and research for business prosperity, both in Scotland and Africa. So I'd love to engage with you on that project if you're passionate about education. But further, agreed, the African diaspora in Scotland, often they don't know, they're not connected to each other, and they don't know the opportunities that exist in Scotland and in Africa for them. You know, I recently spoke in an Ethiopian trade mission, which was hosted by the honorary consul of Ethiopia and Scotland, who heads up the African Research Institute. And many of my African friends in Scotland don't even know that that exists. So again, it's about the education of, you know, all these opportunities through all layers of society and teaching people how to access them. So I completely share your sentiments, Sam.
Fantastic. I love this. And you know, it's the same here in the US as well. And that's why tomorrow morning, like, I just want to encourage people to be up and early for us in the US tomorrow. The first session is actually US government representative joining us for about an hour. It's going to take an hour to really, I already saw his PowerPoint. I'm like, do people really know all of this exists? There's 17 government agencies under Prosper Africa to drive US-Africa trade. And it's going to basically open the hood for us. It's a nice shining car. Just think of Prosper Africa as a car. But what it's going to do tomorrow is open it up and tell us how it works. USAID, all of the agencies, what do they do? What are the opportunities? So you don't want to miss tomorrow morning. And then in the afternoon, we're actually going to bring in an investor who is a dear friend. We're going to have an investor Q&A, the second half of the session. Wow. So what you said is absolutely true. And it's actually my conversation with Sam that I had this light bulb moment to really understand what we're talking about today, that one of the groups of people advancing China-Africa trade is the diaspora. It's actually Africans in Africa and in China that are actually accelerating. They're an accelerant to trade. Like, for example, if I wanted to move things on the continent, you know, there are places I can get to because I'm an African. There are conversations I can have. And also the informal sector on the continent is dominated by women. We're going to have a speaker later this week share more about women economic empowerment, because women control the informal sector on the continent. And when we start talking about AFCFTA, we need to start looking at, if you don't have women in the room, if you want to formalize trade and you don't have those women in the room, you're just pushing paper. You're just literally feeling good. Because I say, you know, in my original country, Nigeria, we used to say the market women, the women of the markets. they control goods. So that's something to watch out for. And I know, Sam, you probably back me up on this, right? Sam?
Well,
yeah, go on.
I've never had a problem working with women. So in fact, I encourage it more and more. There's nothing that brightens up a room more than when a female speaker leads a discussion and lets everybody know what opportunities are available to them. So it seems as though men listen more when that happens. And I think that that should be encouraged. I would say that the movement right now, and I think there's a lot of interest in female empowerment in terms of business opportunities, also education opportunities. And I believe that obviously women are a very large portion of the young population that are currently looking for opportunities to grow and develop in terms of business and so on. So right now we're working with Selva Gundoza Luca of the Afri-Arts Care program in Australia. She has done fantastic work in Malawi, a business partner, a very dear friend, and also a clinical psychologist. She's focused on well-being, and the mental health care services that she provides are almost predominantly focused on giving women the comfort required and reassurance required to overcome some of the trauma from their past and accelerate their business ideas. In fact, as a result of that trauma, they are pushing a lot harder and more equipped and resilient to the issues involved with organizing and accelerating and scaling businesses. So there's a lot that we can learn from women, and I'm absolutely for it.
Right.
I don't do it just because it's a buzzword now. I've been around powerful women my whole life. My two older sisters, my mother. So the more the merrier.
I love it. I love it. And definitely. And you said something quite interesting that I was like, I've never heard that before. You said men should listen more. Should I quote you on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think communication isn't always about speaking. Communication is also about listening. So if there is an opportunity for us to get knowledge, we're not going to get knowledge from speaking. We're going to get knowledge from listening. So yeah, men should definitely listen.
Well, I want to start bringing on questions now. So I'm seeing some comments and questions. I want to start throwing in some questions here. Okay, so how do we ensure we mitigate the risks of doing business with foreign entities such as China while ensuring we are creating sustainable returns in the long run versus short term? I have my thoughts on that, but I'll throw it right at you, Sam. Your advice.
Sure. I've lived and worked in China for over 10 years now. I've got to say that there's risk in doing business in any market. I wouldn't say that there's more risk working with China. I think that's perhaps more to do with propaganda than anything else. I think that when we take a look at doing business in general, we've got to just make sure that it's mutually beneficial. And in fact, what China is doing is it's removing finance from the table. It's asking more about knowledge transfer or material transfer in terms of machine equipment to further advance industrial innovation. One of our partners, Alibaba, has been working in not just digital transformation, but also encouraging more businesses that are in manufacturing to relocate to Africa and build in Africa. There's also the African, I think it's African Superhero Project that a number of different Alibaba executives in Africa are working on. So I think that when we talk about the risk involved with working with China, how is it any different from the risk involved with working with any partner? I don't think there is any difference. In fact, what we need to start talking more about is what are the opportunities in working with a more diverse group of investors, and how can we allow the competition to create more innovation? We have not pushed the boundaries enough. We've not been ambitious enough
Mm.
with the variety of partners that are at our disposal. And we need to be more ambitious. And that, I suppose, comes from the lack of education that we have. The more education we have about opportunities, the more ambitious we will become.
Wow, that's a tweetable right there. If you want to tweet that, hashtag Trade with Africa. Dylan, I want to bring you on here just to get your reaction. Please.
Yeah, look, I think there's a good point there that we need to consider who we're working with and what the opportunity is. You know, Sam has got a good point, and there's obviously, you know, there's a specific Chinese agenda there. I think we need to be cognizant that this is a reality. And whether or not it's China versus someone else, the point is taking it as, you know, wide open. I think there are some historical challenges that exist, and there are different agendas that exist. You know, we know that from my perspective, China had a 2080 strategy 50 years ago. So they are playing the long game. And that is a collaborative play from a, you know, a China view. And then you have, you know, the private sector players inside there, such as Alibaba. And we know that, you know, Jack Ma was part of trying to push the electronic world trade platform, was around breaking down of borders in a digital world, which is done through the UN, which I think is a fantastic initiative, but that's kind of, you know, gone a little bit silent now. I actually met with Brian Wong for the international development and looked at their strategy for growth within emerging markets, and it was actually a grassroots development strategy, which is fantastic, coming from, you know, Jack Ma's kind of, you know, vision for not only the organization but how that looks at development. But we've got to contrast that between government plays of the future, which is access to minerals, it's access to resources, and access to consumer markets, and a place to go and put, you know, sell our products to. So one of the challenges that we face in Africa, and in fact, this has been one of the biggest challenges towards any kind of trade agreements and moving forward continentally, is this fear-based approach that's based on legacy within continent around, we're going to get taken advantage of. We are getting sold a bit of a lemon. It says we're going to win, but we're getting something in the short term. In the long term, we end up losing more. And there's a fear-based conversation that is in. Now, we've got to change a narrative on both sides. And you've all made the good point that a big part of this is around education and understanding really how global value chains work and how we fit into that, and then standing in our power as Africa and understanding what we really have to offer. And that's this value proposition. I spoke about this before in a keynote I gave at an investment summit, of moving from a legacy narrative or mental model of donor-driven funding towards investment-driven funding. And that's going from impact only to return on investment thinking. And there's a fundamental change that has happened within, and still, you know, it's ongoing. This is not a new conversation, but it's a legacy that exists in the way that I engage so often with not only entrepreneurs in continents, but even with government. And so there's little red flags for me when we talk about China. There's red flags for me also when we talk about the US, also when we talk about UK, especially now with Brexit and, you know, new investment opportunities. Same as Central Europe, looking for new markets. We have to change that agenda and that narrative, and that is being pushed from a continental level. There are then sovereign challenges in continents with countries going, well, I want to ensure that I win more than everyone else in continents, and so again, that tension exists.
Wow. Dylan, I would love to publish a paper with you. So what you just said, I say it in a different way: foreign aid versus foreign trade. You talked about move from impact to return on investment. And it's one of the reasons I always tell people, if you want to approach investors, don't say, oh, I need an investor. You're really approaching it as from a weak, very weak spot, like I need money. Instead, try something like, I have an investment opportunity I would like to share with you. Which is what you talked about in terms of understanding your value proposition. What's your value proposition to an investor, and approaching that conversation from a place of strength versus I need money. Well, what are you bringing to the table? So I would definitely, as one of the outcomes, just take that as a topic. It doesn't have to be a big paper. It could be 2, 3, 4 pages, you and I, and definitely I have a platform to push it out to over 20,000 plus people around the world. So let's take that as an action item. Do you accept?
I don't really have a choice to it, but yes, I know. I accept. Let's
You
do
do
it.
have a choice, Dylan. Someone once said, Toy, ask us to do anything, we'll do it. Dylan, you have a choice, definitely.
Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Fantastic. I also want, there's a question coming in. I also want us to bring this down. I know we all can talk at a very high level, but I want us to give advice based on this next question. Bernard is saying, how do I partner with companies that intend to invest in Africa? So this is someone on the continent that is doing everything they can to position themselves to be potentially, should I say, facilitator of an entry, a foreign investor, or foreign partner, or diaspora trying to come into market. And I suspect Ghana, Bernard, right? What advice would you give that such a person right now on the continent that they want to be a trusted partner for the future of Africa? What would you advise? I'll start with you, Claire. I have you on screen, so let me start with you. Any advice?
Yeah, sure. I would network. I would network with all the foreign networks within Ghana. I know, you've got all the embassies up there. They all have chambers. Get in touch with them. You don't have to join them. You're more than welcome to ask for advice. It's the same, although we're Africa Scotland Business Network isn't a government chamber, we're an independent network. There are also other independent foreign networks. And you might have a country, you might have investors from a particular country or a continent that you want to work with. Get in touch with them, do your homework about them, see who's looking to move into Africa via the networks that are on your home turf in Africa. That's where I would start. I would also ensure that you have, you're completely compliant as a business. Companies that we deal with in Scotland and the UK, and I say Africa, Scotland, we've got members from all over the world, so we really are dealing with an international community with a focus on Africa. They want to ensure that the businesses that we put forward for partnership are completely vetted and trusted. So they view us as an entire network and our companies as a source of social and business trust. So I would definitely, spend a bit of money on getting yourself vetted.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Sam, because come in here. The reason I need you also is, even with your work, you're always looking for trusted partner on ground, correct?
That's pretty much my bread and butter business. Partnerships is what I do. In terms of the African entrepreneur who wants or is looking for outward investment, I would say two main areas. Of course, you've just mentioned KYC. So you beat me to it there, Claire. Absolutely evaluate what your value proposition in terms of your KYC is. And by that, I mean, how long have you been in business? What are your financials in terms of how much money can you put up as a private investor for a project? Also, who are your local partners? And that leads into the second part. Who knows you? Who outside of your network can say, this particular entrepreneur, we vouch for that person, we recognize that person. And by that, I mean both from the private side, and by the private side, I mean the chambers of commerce, and from the public side as well, I mean specifically the industry that you are going to establish a project in, which public entity can recognize your work and appreciate the FDI that you're trying to introduce to that project. And in fact, this is actually universal, not just in Africa. I've been involved in a project in Israel, and I've said exactly the same thing. They want to build an innovation hub in a small rural community in Israel. And I said to them, okay, who knows you? And what is the KYC? Who am I talking to here? Am I talking to you, the individual, or am I talking to a registered entity that's been in business for 5 to 10 years, that's completed projects in that time of a certain investment value that has returned a certain amount of profit, which is excitable, it's going to excite any potential investor. So Maybe it's just because that's what I'm interested in, and that's what I would recommend, because from what I've heard and from what I've seen, there's been a lot of interest in MSMEs and seed capital funding in Africa. Personally, that's not exactly where I'm focusing my business on. I'm more interested in somebody who's not going from 0 to 1, but more from 1 to 10 or from 1 to 100. So when we start talking to those kinds of entrepreneurs, we have a system in place where we can verify them, train them how to become verified, and also get them the capital of overseas to grow their business and scale their business, not just within their nation, but also internationally, which is obviously kind of why I'm here.
Yes, yes. And I just love the way you phrase this is that 0 to 10 versus, right? That's one of the things I've also had to do to really group the community, to say some are new to business. And that's why I now teach basic business development, because we do need to groom people to be ready a year, 2 years from now. But there are some that are ready to go to the next level. I would say, ready to go, right? And those people, definitely, we can facilitate that immediately. But I still see a bigger pool of people that actually requires, and this is my challenge to you, Sam, is that they actually require so much hand holding that is unreal, but we have to commit somehow to them, right? So,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
go on.
Absolutely. I just heard of a business called, I think it's Assimilia, that is a digital company that helps MSMEs with setting up their financial tools, their e-commerce shop and so on. And I think MSMEs should really be looking at the digital opportunity there, having a web shop for their service and for their item, whatever they are producing. And that's an easier way, not just to make sales, but for somebody from another part of the world to learn more about that particular business. If you come in there with a website where somebody can say, okay, you've been doing this for X amount of years, you produce this goods, this service, they'll see that, and then they'll be able to act upon that information. A lot of MSMEs are, they have a very traditional approach to doing business overseas. Perhaps they have a product that they want to produce to an international market, and therefore they're looking for an investment to scale their production capacity or their the storage capacity. But they don't have a website. They don't have any form of verification other than their basic KYC, or we've got documents from the government and so on. So that's, I would say that the first step in that situation is the recognition process. And by that, I mean having the private and public endorsement of your business. But there are institutions already in place for MSMEs. There's been a radical push from the public sector to empower MSMEs. By MSMEs, we mean talk about small entities, micro enterprises that are normally informal in their ways of doing business. There's been a massive push to formalize, to incorporate, and to allow them to grow. And in fact, that's exactly what His Excellency said at the beginning of your presentation. So I think taking advantage of that opportunity is the next step, and also becoming more humble. Just because you are doing very well in your town, in your locality, and you're producing a very exciting product that has a lot of overseas potential, doesn't necessarily mean that an investor actually wants to invest in your product. You have to understand that you have to speak that investor's language. And a lot of people don't, and by that I don't mean literally speaking, for example, Scottish or Chinese. I specifically mean, do you understand what the investor wants to hear? What kind of returns are they looking for? What kind of sectors are they interested in? Don't talk to somebody who's invested the past 10 years of their life in agriculture and fisheries and talk to them about an exciting new project in road manufacturing or telecommunications or an app that you just built. Not unless it's something that is aligned to what they're doing. Speak their language. Try and talk to them about what you're doing is going to help them do what they're doing. So I think that would be the biggest help to advancing their agenda.
Fantastic. So I want to connect what you just said to the next question, and then I'll trade that to Mr. Dylan. Okay. So Catherine is saying, as an African living in the US, how do I get my products, for example, in Walmart? My idea is that we in Diaspora need support to grow our businesses. We can continue to support local producers or the economy in Africa. Just so in answering this question, Dylan, I'll come back after you provide your insights and your recommendation and your advice. But I want you to answer it broadly, because within the retail space and the e-commerce space, like, with your background, just answer it broadly in terms of people who have products that want to take it international or want to get it on the retail shelf. What does it take? Dylan.
Yeah, look, you're going to obviously talk to the Walmart experience, because everyone around the world asks that question. Going back to and linking what Sam has said, this is about accessing the platforms. You don't need to try to do this yourself, especially when you're talking at your micro, medium perspective. I remember sitting with Chris Folleyan at dinner in Geneva. And now, for those of you that aren't aware of it, please go look at the concept Mall for Africa. It is an Pan-African e-commerce platform, and it was actually created by Chris, who was at Ivy League schools and universities in the US, yet based out of Nigeria. And every time he went back to Nigeria, he would bring back the different top end clothing lines, etc., for his family and friends. So they're saying, please, can you order these for me? I need to order on Amazon. I don't have an address. I'm going to give your address and just bring it with you. And he created this platform so that you could start bringing US product into Nigeria. So essentially opening up eBay platform where it was started to the Nigerian population. What happened though through this evolution is suddenly a two-way mechanism, whereby anyone within Nigeria could start putting their product on a platform that would be made available through eBay, and then a distribution part of DHL to American consumers. So now this is expanded now across the continent, not just a Nigerian play. And he tells me the story of a 60-year-old Nigerian man who was in tears because someone in Texas bought his product. Now, this is incredible, and the opportunity presents is amazing, but do we know about it, and are we accessing it? We don't have to go create it ourselves. The platform is there. The relationships have been created. The payment mechanisms that are credible, secure, have been created. The distribution mechanisms have been created. We just need to go log on to them, have a product. Now, the next question, though, is around quality, because there is a legacy around global products having superior quality to African product. And this is a challenge. We're seeing the rise, Mara telephones, cell phones, etc. We're seeing incredible products that are starting to come out of Africa. So we also need to ensure that we maintain a certain kind of standard. And there is a launch, and perhaps this is a platform to discuss that, around what we call an African product standards stamp of approval. Mm-hmm. I think that's quite important. And obviously that's looking from Africa into the rest of the world. So that's outbound. Inbound is, of course, a different story. In the inbound side of things, one of the challenges is around ensuring that something that's coming out of China, which is essentially a copy, isn't coming up as number one on the list. And so the consumer, not knowing any different, is going to buy the product out of China versus the original out of Lagos, simply because they know no different. And that's another challenge that we obviously got to explore. So there are a number of different challenges. There's one other story I want to share, I think, just on that concept. It's a company that I engaged with in Kenya called Shop Soka. A brilliant concept. It was actually two Americans who were in Kenya, and they realized they're walking around the streets. It's incredible vendors on the side of the street selling bone, ivory, brass, bracelets, accessories, etc. But it was literally on the side of the road, and they realized that this has incredible value internationally, but low perceived value locally. And they created a digitized platform. So they actually created a mobile-based ERP system for these vendors, or these ladies, essentially women on the side of the road, through a handhold, where they could create security of supply of sales. So they said, fine, we'll take your product. We'll give you a guaranteed sales pipeline per month. We're going to take your product, we're going to repackage it, freshen it up, and we're going to sell it to the rest of the world through e-commerce to 75 different international markets. 96% of the revenue comes from a dollar-based premium for a product that's seen as a low-based product and only through face-to-face sales locally. So there is significant opportunity there, and I think these stories we can just emulate across the continent.
Yes, absolutely. And I see some questions. So Chris Folayon is a friend of the this platform. He's actually spoken on this platform before. There was a question around what's the name of the website. He has a couple, but the one in question is more for Africa. And I do have his presentation that actually talks about what that is. With the trade, because it's been featured on the Trade with Africa Business Summit before. So definitely that's something I want to say. If you go to the website, Nazaro.trade, I think it's one of those videos. If it's not, we'll get it on the platform before the end of the day in terms of his video where he presented. It was a pitch, TED Talk style, where he pitched the Mall for Africa, what they actually ship. And one of the things that I still have in my mind about his presentation was saying that he ships more gummy bears. One of the largest things he ships from the US to Africa is gummy bears. And he says he doesn't know what, but Africans love gummy bears. So that's a video, definitely. I think I'll take note of that. Before the end of the day, we can put it out on our platform for you to watch. And Chris is definitely a call away. And he's somebody that I can actually bring during our monthly engagement. He could come talk to our community as well. So Chris Folayon, thank you so much for bringing that up. Chris, for those looking for it, thank you for typing it. Chris Folayon, More for Africa. The link, and Dylan just dropped the link. Check it out there. And he also integrates actually with big retails where Africans can buy US products. Okay, we're coming to the hour. I promised I want to release everybody today. What we usually do is I'll move all the conversations, everything that was typed, I'll move it over to our platform, and then the conversations can continue for the rest of the day. Tomorrow, please, for those of us here in the US, let's be back here early. I'm now going to ask my panelists for their last words, but all the other questions we're going to move, the ones we've not gotten to. I apologize. I want to really respect people's time. So Claire, let's go back to you on your parting words and what you've experienced so far, and anything you want to leave us with today. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much to you, Tonyan, for organising this amazing panel and event today. I hope the audience has enjoyed themselves. My final words to the audience, whoever's listening today, is trust in Africa. It's the next biggest thing. It's a rising global international player. It's time for Africa to be taken seriously. We are doing so much work in an ambassador's role in Scotland, not as an ambassador per se, but certainly through our network. We are Africa's ambassadors in Scotland. We are also in tune with what Dylan was talking about earlier. We're changing the narrative on Africa. It's a fantastic place to do business. It's a rich, diverse continent with the most talented, strong people, and they're willing to do business with the international community. And it's like people like ourselves on the panel that have a responsibility to help change that narrative and ensure that Africa is empowered, Africans are empowered, and that we put our countries, our native countries, putting Africa on the map for serious global business.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sam, your turn. Parting words.
It's going to be pretty difficult to top that one. Well done, Claire. I think that if you want to do business in Africa, work with Africans. We have a huge amount of network capability that is untapped and just requires a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. So work with Africans. We are Africans. We know the market better than anybody else. So work with Africans.
I love it. Hashtag work with Africans. Thank you, Sam.
Simple is
Dylan.
best.
Sorry?
Simple is best.
Simple is best. Thank you so much, Dylan. Please.
Hashtag work with Africans. Can't say more. I think that's fantastic. But there is one quote that we used to have, and I never understood it when I first started as a junior in corporate, was get movement and direction will follow. Don't worry about having to know this is exactly how I do everything. Just start. Claire, great example of what she's done. It's just starting. Toyin, what you've done was just starting. Momentum builds. What Sam has done and continues to do is just getting momentum, and direction will follow, and you'll have multiple different direction paths. So that's what I encourage everyone with this conversation. Start, whether it's trading with Africa, moving product into Africa, or African product into the US or the rest of the world.
Wow, lovely. Finally, I just want to open, we have a few panelists here. I just want to take maybe 1-2 reactions from any of our panelists just to honor you. I know you'll be speaking later in the week. Does anybody want to say something before we close this out for today? Any of our panelist speakers here? I know I had asked you all to mute. Now I'm asking who wants to unmute. Just
I can say a word. Professor
Mbele?
Yes.
Please.
This has been amazing. I've learned a lot as a cultural consultant. When people are talking about risks of going to another country, they're talking about partnerships. The lady from Scotland is saying she always wants to collaborate and partner with other people. When people talk about going into the unknown and just ignorance of other people, I felt I've learned a lot that will help me shape my own talk. Because when you are afraid of going into China, all you have to do is learn about the Chinese, learn about their culture, the way they do business, and let them know about you. It's very much knowing about the persons and their culture and their values. You can predict their reactions when you do something, you can anticipate, how they're going to respond in this. The fear will go, there will be less risk. So I appreciate all the panelists for raising these questions. They have really enlightened me as somebody who is not in the field of trade and business, but is simply a cultural consultant. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Such an honor. And I look forward to your conversation as well with Mr. John. I see Mr. Abrafi. Yes, please, Mr. Lasumbo from Nigeria. Yes, come on.
From Nigeria. Thank you so much. I want to say a big thank you to the panelists, Mr. Sam, Mr. Dylan, Ms. Claire. All your discussions were quite insightful and very, very helpful. My key takeaway from this, Mr. Sam talked about establishing business in China. That's quite a good one. Then what Ms. Claire said about the Scotland African business, you started with one company and you're going to 85. That's a big one. And what Mr. Dylan said, that as a small business owner, starts. That is it. You join up with 1,000 miles, begin with a step. Start. When you start, you go. By the time you just see what is happening, you go to a multinational, and we're able to do some handholding for some other MSMEs that are coming up. This is really, really good. And I look forward to engaging with you more and more. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Olasumbo. She's a member of our community here. We're coaching. I look forward to hearing more. She'll share more of her story on Friday, how she empowers women in the shea value chain. She's doing amazing. How's the factory going? The factory?
It's going on well.
Awesome.
Going on well.
Awesome. So yeah, okay. Friday, I'm looking forward to you sharing your story and the women you empower. Awesome.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Brafi is coming in from as an attendee. You raised your hand. Do you want to quickly jump in, please? Or we're trying to wrap this up. Please
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that is in the room on the panel who has provided detailed information, and I look forward to the rest of the week. My name is Abrafi. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought you so good to have you, and apologies for that. Thank you. Shane, do you want to jump in? I see your hand raised. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to say, it was honestly such a pleasure to listen, and not just the knowledge shared in the session, but also the resources shared in the chat. You know, that's fantastic, and I really encourage that. And I wanted to share, since we're talking about quotes, there's an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So I just thought I'd add to that as well.
Awesome. And thank you so much for being a part of this. Such an honor. I'm also looking forward to your presentation as well. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and move on to the virtual space. Nazaru, NAZARU.trade. You can search, for example, Sean's name. You can search for the speaker's bio and engage there and connect with people. I really do want to respect everybody's time, and I look forward to tomorrow morning. Thank you, everyone, and see you tomorrow. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yes.